Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something that might seem a little surprising at first. It's something we all experience every day.
Itching.
Exactly. But we're not just talking about the physical sensation,
Yeah,
the kind that makes you want to scratch.
we're going way deeper than that.
We're going to be exploring the spiritual side of itching.
That's right. The idea that itching might actually hold some deeper meaning, maybe even some spiritual insight.
I know it sounds kind of out there,
Yeah.
but when I came across this piece, exploring esoteric interpretations of itching, well, I was hooked.
Yeah. It really makes you think differently about something we usually just take for granted.
So where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, one of the first things the source points out is how often we itch when we're distracted. Like when you're lost in thought, totally zoned out.
And suddenly, bam, your arm starts itching in your nose.
It's like our body's way of saying, hey, hell there. Come back to the present moment.
Like a little wake-up call from our own system.
Exactly. Itching might be a sort of built-in mindfulness bell reminding us to be present.
That's so interesting because it's true. When I think about it, I do seem to itch more when my mind is racing or I'm stressed out.
Right. And think about what happens when you actually pay attention to the itch instead of immediately scratching.
You start to really feel it, the tingling, the burning, or maybe even just a little tickle.
And as you observe it, you realize it's not this solid, unchanging thing. It morphs, it intensifies, it might move around a bit.
Sometimes it even vanishes as you're paying attention to it.
And that's a powerful observation because it reflects a core truth about reality itself. Everything is impermanent, constantly changing.
Even an itch.
Even an itch. It's a mini lesson in mindfulness and the nature of change.
Okay, but hold on. This source goes even deeper, connecting different areas of the body to different energy centers like chakras.
Ah, yes.
Now, this is where things start to get really interesting.
I'll admit, when I first read that, I thought it might be a bit of a stretch. Well, various traditions have long associated specific body parts with certain energies or aspects of our being. The source gives some specific examples.
Like an itch on the left palm being about abundance.
Or a right foot itch, signifying a journey.
Okay, so each itch has its own special meaning.
Well, I think the key takeaway isn't to get obsessed with mapping every itch to a chakra chart.
Right. We don't need to carry around a decoder ring for our itches.
Exactly. The real point is that our bodies are always communicating with us through subtle signals,
And itching could be one of those signals.
offering a glimpse into our inner state.
So it's more about paying attention to what our bodies are trying to tell us.
Right. And seeing if there might be a deeper meaning behind those seemingly random itches.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. But the source also talks about itching as a metaphor for desire, right?
Ah, yes. That's a really fascinating point.
It's like we all know that feeling of wanting to scratch an itch to get relief.
But the source suggests it mirrors how we often seek quick fixes in life, whether it's chasing pleasure achievements or possessions.
So we're constantly trying to scratch that itch of wanting more, wanting something to make us feel complete.
And just like scratching only provides temporary relief, those external pursuits often leave us feeling empty. So the source challenges us to consider a different approach.
What if instead of scratching, we sat with the discomfort of desire?
Let that wanting be there without trying to fix it.
Honestly, that sounds pretty tough.
It can be, but think about those times you've had an itch in a situation where you couldn't scratch it, like during an important meeting or something.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
You're forced to just be with that feeling.
And you usually survive. The itch doesn't actually kill you.
Precisely. And we might even discover a hidden strength in those moments, an ability to be with discomfort without reacting right away.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those itches that just won't quit? The really persistent ones? Does the source have a spiritual angle on those too?
It does, and this is where things get really interesting.
Lay it on me.
According to the source, chronic itching might be a sign of something deeper going on. It could be our body's way of expressing unresolved inner tensions, beliefs we're holding on to, or even past experiences that haven't been fully processed.
So it's like our body's trying to get our attention, but we're not listening?
You could see it that way. The persistent itch might be a physical manifestation of something we need to address on a deeper level.
So even though we might need medical treatment for the physical symptoms, true healing could require us to look inward.
That's the idea. And this brings us to one of the most mind-blowing parts of the source. It asks this question: where does the itch actually end and the non-itching begin?
I remember reading that and thinking, whoa, it really makes you question your whole experience of an itch.
Right. We assume there's a clear boundary between the itching and the non-itching, between the me that's itching and the not me that isn't. But is that really the case?
It's like when you really focus on the sensation, the dividing line gets blurry. It makes you wonder if our sense of a separate self is more of an idea than a reality.
And that's a profound insight. The source connects this to mindfulness practices where we learn to observe sensations, thoughts, and emotions without judgment, recognizing they're all part of a flowing experience. Even an itch can point us to the interconnectedness of everything.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued. We started with a simple itch, and now we're talking about the nature of reality. Mind blown.
It's amazing what we can discover when we start looking deeper, isn't it?
So much more to this itching thing than meets the eye.
Yeah,
And there's still more to explore, right?
absolutely. In part two, we'll dive into how different spiritual traditions interpret itching and how this understanding can transform our relationship with our bodies and the world around us. Stay tuned.
Can't wait. See you all next time.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the spiritual meaning of itching. Last time we were talking about how itching can be a call to presence
A metaphor for desire.
and even a hint at the interconnectedness of everything.
And remember how we touched on the idea that different parts of the body could relate to different energy centers?
Exactly. Our source goes deeper into that, suggesting that the human body is more than just a physical structure. It's also a complex energy system.
Right. And different traditions have different ways of understanding that energy system. The source specifically mentions chakras.
Those energy centers often associated with various aspects of our being.
Precisely. And the idea here is that an itch in a particular area of the body could be a message from that corresponding chakra. For example, an itch on the forehead, where the third eye chakra is located, might relate to intuition or insight.
So instead of just absent-mindedly scratching it, we could ask ourselves, what insight is trying to emerge here?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Similarly, the source mentions an itch in the throat area, which might be connected to the throat chakra.
That chakra is associated with communication and self-expression.
So maybe that nagging itch in your throat is a sign you need to speak your truth or express something you've been holding back.
It's certainly a possibility worth considering. But remember, this isn't about creating a rigid system of interpretation where we try to decode every single itch.
All right, it's not like we need to consult a chakra chart every time we get an itch. It's more about the bigger picture, isn't it?
Exactly. The real value lies in using this perspective as a starting point for self-inquiry. It's about tuning into our bodies, paying attention to those subtle signals, and asking ourselves what they might mean.
So it's about developing a deeper awareness of the connection between our physical sensations and our inner world. But how do we do that without getting lost in overanalyzing every itch?
The source points to mindfulness as a key practice here. It's about bringing your full attention to the itch
Noticing its location, intensity, quality.
without immediately giving in to the urge to scratch.
It's almost like a mini meditation, using the itch as an anchor for your awareness.
That's a great way to think about it. And as you practice this, you might notice something quite remarkable.
Simply by observing the itch with focused attention.
It might change or even vanish altogether.
Which reminds us that our sensations are always in flux, and even our perception of them can influence our experience.
And even if the itch doesn't completely disappear, we're still building a valuable skill.
The ability to be with discomfort without needing to react right away.
Absolutely. It's about cultivating that space between stimulus and response, where we have a choice in how we respond. But what about when the itch is so persistent that it feels like it's driving us crazy?
Those chronic itches that just won't quit. The source talks about that too, right?
Yes, and this is where the spiritual perspective gets really profound. Chronic itching, according to the source, might point to a deeper issue at an emotional or spiritual level.
So it's like our body is trying to communicate something, but
Yeah.
we're not getting the message.
That's one way to look at it. The persistent itch could be a physical manifestation of an unresolved inner conflict, a belief we're clinging to, or even a past trauma that hasn't been fully processed.
So while we might need medical treatment for the physical symptoms, true healing could involve addressing those deeper issues.
Exactly. It's about looking at the whole picture, understanding the context of our lives, and seeing what might be contributing to that chronic itching.
Wow, so an itch can be a lot more than just an annoying sensation.
That's right. The source challenges us to see itching as a potential doorway to deeper self-awareness, a call to presence, and even a signpost pointing us towards healing.
Okay, I'm definitely ready to explore this further. What else can we learn from the spiritual perspective on itching?
Well, in part 3, we'll delve into how this understanding can transform our relationship with our bodies and the world around us. Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into itching.
I'm so ready to see where we end up with this.
Well, we've talked about how itching can be a call to presence, how it can be a metaphor for desire.
And now chronic itching could even be a sign of something deeper going on emotionally or spiritually.
Right. And now we're going to take all of those insights and see how they can change our relationship with our bodies and the world around us.
Sounds good to me.
Mm.
Where do we begin?
Well, the source encourages us to question our usual way of seeing the body.
How so?
We often think of it as a separate, solid thing, but the experience of itching can actually reveal something much different.
It's like that question we talked about earlier. Where does the itch end and the non-itching begin?
Exactly. That question points to a fundamental truth about our experience.
Which is
Boundaries we perceive between ourselves and the world.
between the me that's itching and the not me that isn't.
Right. Those boundaries might be more illusory than we realize.
So it's not just about the itch itself.
It's about what it teaches us about how we perceive things.
I like that.
The more closely we observe the feeling of itching,
The
we might notice that it's not a fixed, solid sensation.
It's more like,
It's fluid, it changes.
and that boundary between the itch and the surrounding area.
It isn't as clear-cut as we might have thought.
You know, it's like when you look at a rainbow.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You can't really pinpoint where one color ends and the next one begins.
They blend together seamlessly.
Exactly.
That's a great analogy. And this blurring of boundaries can be a profound insight.
How so?
It suggests that our sense of a separate self
A me that's distinct from everything else?
might be more of a concept than a lived reality.
Okay, so instead of seeing ourselves as these isolated individuals,
Maybe we're more like
waves in an ocean.
constantly interacting and interconnected with everything around us.
I love that. And I think that leads perfectly into what the source says about compassion.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
When we recognize our interconnectedness, compassion arises naturally,
It's like we realize that everyone else's struggles and joys,
aren't separate from our own.
we're all in this together.
Exactly. And this isn't just some abstract idea.
It can be a lived experience.
And it can start with something as simple as paying attention to an itch.
Wow. So for our listeners who are ready to put this into practice, what would you suggest?
Next time you feel an itch,
Don't scratch.
resist that automatic urge to scratch. Just pause for a moment.
Okay.
Bring your full attention to the sensation.
Notice.
Notice where it is, how intense it is, the quality of the feeling. See if you can observe any subtle changes as you pay attention.
So it's like a mini meditation practice.
Using the itch as an anchor for your awareness.
That's a great way to think about it.
And as you practice this, you might start to realize that the itch itself isn't the problem. The problem is our habitual reaction to it, the urge to get rid of it as quickly as possible.
But if we can learn to just be with the itch, to observe it without judgment,
We might discover a whole new way of relating to discomfort.
and not just physical discomfort, but emotional and mental discomfort as well,
And that ability to be present with whatever arises.
is at the heart of true peace and freedom.
Beautifully said. So there you have it.
We started with a simple itch, and look where we ended up.
Exploring the nature of reality, the interconnectedness of all things, and the power of mindful awareness.
Next time you feel that familiar urge to scratch,
Don't just react,
pause, pay attention.
and see what you discover.
You might be amazed at what you find within yourself and the world around you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.